Dear brothers and sisters, we have gone through the first week of the Great Fast. We read the great canon of St. Andrew of Crete. We have begun to fast from meat and dairy. We shut off our televisions and don't play games on our computers. We spend our free time reading scripture, the lives of the saints, and other spiritually uplifting literature. We've begun to change our life, our daily schedule. We've just begun. And here we are, the first Sunday of the Great Fast, and it's a feast day. Not a feast day where we could relax our fasting. The fasting continues. But we're wearing gold vestments today because today is the triumph of Orthodoxy. The triumph of the restoration of the veneration of icons. Unfortunately, the church suffered much because of people who refused to venerate icons. For more than 100 years, beginning in the 8th century, iconoclasm, the fight against icons, raged throughout Christian lands. Monks were beaten and killed. Monasteries and churches were closed. Many places, people would come in and basically whitewash the walls to cover icons. People were brought out of their homes. Icons were confiscated. It's hard for us to imagine that, but it happened. Finally, in 843, many years after the Seventh Ecumenical Council in 787, reestablishing or confirming the veneration of icons, it took until finally 843 for all the raging to subside. And it was established the first Sunday of the Great Fast in that year to exclaim the triumph of Orthodoxy. Now, when we venerate an icon, there are many critics. To this day, people comment on sermons that are posted on the internet and accuse us of being idol worshipers because in the background they see many icons. But we don't worship wood or paint. We don't kiss these objects thinking that God or a saint or the Mother of God is in their place. But rather we use icons to express our veneration to God Himself. God, who is indescribable, allows Himself to be described when He comes into this world and takes flesh. And likewise, the saints and the Mother of God, they lived. They're real people. And when we kiss an icon, we show veneration to Christ, or to the Mother of God, or to a saint. We show veneration to God Himself, God who is real, God who exists. People who worshipped idols, these idols represented things that didn't exist. All of us probably have a picture of a loved one in our house, whether he or she is alive or has departed this life. And that picture is probably in a very important place. And sometimes we talk to that picture, don't we? Let's be honest. Sometimes we look at that picture and we express prayers for that person, or hold on to worry or anxiety or concern, we're not worshiping that photograph, are we? We're not venerating that photograph. We're showing our love to the person depicted in that photograph. And so the battle raged for over 100 years. And to this day, there's still falsehood that tries to overcome orthodoxy. Falsehood that tries to overcome truth. Our own society has become victim. Morality has changed so much that nobody knows what the truth is anymore. What's true for me is not true for you. And what's tragic, people accept that. People accept that. The triumph of orthodoxy for us, brothers and sisters, is not just a historical event. It's an ongoing process in life. We struggle to live our lives in such a way that orthodoxy triumphs in our life. Saint Ignatius Branchaninov says that the human soul is like a mirror, and everything that's reflected on that mirror leaves an impression. Of course, we know a real mirror, once anything is removed, it just is blank. But for the human soul, things that are reflected in us leave an impression. Many of us know how long sometimes it takes for anger to leave us, resentment. It leaves a great impression. When our pride is injured, it leaves a great impression. When we live a sinful life, darkness overcomes us. And conversely, when we strive to draw closer to God, when we strive to pray and be touched by His grace, when we search out His will and strive to follow His commandments, all of this leaves an impression on us. We all feel it. We feel different coming into church than we do when we leave the church on a Sunday liturgy. Because we're standing in the presence of God, and His grace descends upon us and touches us. And so this impression that's supposed to be on us, that's the triumph of orthodoxy. When we can truly reflect the light of Christ. When people look at us, they don't see John or Mary. They see the light of Christ. They see the warmth of God's grace. They see faith and love and patience. When we look at icons of saints, we see characteristics that are very common among all of them, because all of them have a burning love for God. And we look at these saints and we also see Christ Himself. We see God's grace active. But our mirrors are darkened. They're not like the saints. Our mirrors are soiled. They're dirty. They don't reflect. And the impressions left on them, for many of us, these impressions cause us to be ashamed. But here we are in the Great Fast, where the Church calls us to pray and to abstain from various foods and entertainment, to struggle with ourselves so that through prayer and fasting, this darkness can be wiped away. The things that we have done that we are ashamed of can be forgiven and cleaned away, and that our mirror, our soul, can now be opened up to impressions of God's will, impressions of God's grace, of His love. And that's when orthodoxy triumphs over us. when we change our lives so that we can reflect Christ. So let us, brothers and sisters, not blend in with this world around us, not accept the falsehoods that it teaches, but only accept God's truth, only seek out His will, only follow His morality, His commandments. And when we live an Orthodox life, we have greater peace and comfort and strength. The world around us may not change for the better. It may still change for the worst. We don't have control over that. But we have control over how we react to the world around us. That's why we're here in Lent. That's why we strive so that the impression that is left on the mirror on our soul is good and gives us peace. The martyrs stood up to all kinds of torture. Today we commemorate many monks from Valam who were living a quiet, peaceful life in this isolated island in northwest Russia, and were invaded by foreigners and were killed just because they were Orthodox. No other reason. But they stood firm. They couldn't change the world around them, but they didn't lose the great pearl, the pearl of faith, the pearl of love for God, which is eternal. So let us, brothers and sisters, live an Orthodox life. Let us truly be Orthodox, not because we have a Russian cross around our neck, not because we bless ourselves a different way, and not even because we may have an icon in our house. Let us be Orthodox by how we live, praying every day, seeking God's will, following His commandments, fasting when the Church tells us to fast, being supportive, humble, patient, kind, generous, forgiving, and loving. Let us live an Orthodox life so that the triumph of Orthodoxy may also reign here for us. Amen.